What if the version of you've been chasing is actually the one you've been trying to return to all along? The one before the noise, before the burnout, before you started shrinking to fit a life that never really fit you. This isn't about starting over. It's about returning. Returning to your soul, returning to your truth, the version of you that has always been meant to be. Each week, we're going to offer up real stories, hard-earned wisdom, and practical tools from powerful returns to help you reconnect with who you are and why you're here. I'm your host, Bryan White, and this is The Return Project. Today, sitting across from me is Kam Knight. Oh my, has he got the answer to a big question for us? Have you ever sat there and asked yourself, I have all the tools, I've read all the books, I swear I know what I'm doing, I should be able to figure this out. Why am I not doing it? He has the answer to what could feel like procrastination. He is here to sit down and share with us the incredible story of how he overcame and answered that burning question and the wild places it took him. So Kam, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Bryan. I am happy to be here.
So Kam, I'm going to pass the floor right over to you because I can't wait to dive into this question and have you share with our audience what is probably one of the most crippling questions that the majority of us get stuck with.
Yeah.
Why am I not doing the things I want to do?
Yeah. So I'll get started by just sharing a little bit about myself. My name is Kam Knight. I'm a mentor, international speaker, and an author of a dozen books in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance. And as far back as I can remember, I have been a fairly driven individual. It's kind of hard not to be, living in this culture and society with so much personal development content and really everyone telling you to do more, be your best self, and reach for the stars. And as a result, I've always wanted to do more, have more, and enjoy more in life. And although I've had my fair share of success, I always felt like I missed the mark, or the success was much more stressful than it needed to be. And I always wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. Now, at the time, there were no clear answers. The best answers I heard or came across was that you need better beliefs or that you need to have motivation or discipline. And yes, those are all part of the equation. Those are all very important, but I always felt like there was more to it. And over the last 15 to 20 years, that question lingered in my mind. Every time I felt stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want? And the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human brain. And over time, I kept hearing different things of this is what holds us back, or this is what's going to keep us from moving forward, and things of that nature. And like I said, over time, my brain started to realize that, hey, wait a minute, there's a part of our mind designed to hold us back. There's a part of our brain built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's a brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it.
I would love to dissect this even further. Yeah. What are some of the pieces you were just talking about in there that do hold us back? What are the pieces of the brain that are creating that internal resistance?
Yeah. So to understand resistance, it really helps to understand that the part of the brain that creates wants and desires, it actually works separately and independent of the part that allows you to act on that desire. So this is a very important piece. The part of the brain that creates wants works separately from the part that allows you to act on those wants. So you have one part of the brain that's creating wants and desires, and it's creating them one after another. It doesn't check to see if you have the time, energy, and resources. And then you have the other part that analyzes this want, and it's the part that checks to see if you have the time, energy, and resources. So what's really important to understand is that our brain can create a want and at the same time keep us from going after it, which is kind of crazy because for a long time I used to think whoever created humans, whether it was God or aliens or even evolution, must have been really sick and twisted, because how could they do this to us? How could they create this burning desire and then keep us from going after it? It just sounds so twisted. But when you realize that the two different parts are independent, it makes a lot more sense. And to get better sense of what I'm getting at, it helps to understand that every time you have a want or desire, it gets evaluated by this part of the brain using a whole host of criterias. And if any of the criterias is not in line, the brain or this part resistance will prevent action. So it helps to think about standing before a panel of judges or a board of directors, because every decision that comes up must go through them. And if even one of the members is against the idea, it will not pass. Now, to answer your question, what are some of these things that the brain analyzes to see if we should do something or not? Well, there's a whole list of items, and some of the more commonly known or obvious ones that are talked about in personal development include things like beliefs, habits, and even comfort zones. If we try to do something that goes against our beliefs, our brain will stop us. If we try to do something that's not in line with our habits, meaning if we haven't developed a habit for it, it'll be difficult to do and it'll create so much pain. The brain is like, nope, we don't want the pain. We can't do it. Or if we're treading outside of our comfort zone, our brain is like, well, this is going outside of what we are comfortable or what we know, so it'll pull us back. Now, these are just the common reasons, but the criteria go pretty deep. It can go into your self-image, where a lot of people have created a self-image for themselves of being cool, smart, studious, tech-savvy, or that they're this great artist, musician, or they have this great story. But they won't study, apply themselves, or put themselves out there, because if things don't go well, they have to face the fact that they're not this great self-image they've created for themselves. So it's much easier not to do the thing and hold on to that self-image than to do it and face the possibility of proving it wrong. So in this case, the resistance comes up because the brain doesn't want to threaten or lose that self-image that they've created for themselves. So they'll hold us back to protect that. But then it goes even deeper, where a lot of times we don't do something not because of the task or activity, but what finishing or completing that task or activity will lead to or bring. A great example of this is many authors want to write a book, tell their story, and get their message out into the world. But a lot of times they have resistance to doing it because when you finish the book, you have to market it and put yourself out there. And a lot of people aren't ready to put themselves out there because they are too afraid of the feedback and criticism. So the brain will sabotage us from doing something now to not face something bigger later. But it goes even deeper than that, Brian. There's a concept called authority issues, and authority issues relate to our unconsciously held attitudes toward authority figures such as parents, principals, priests, police officers, and even personal development coaches like myself. Where what happens is, if a child is growing up constantly being told what to do, what not to do, how to do it, and how not to do it, over time, their brain gets fed up and doesn't want to do anything or listen to anybody. And even though they get to a point in life where they do want to do certain things that they were told, like eating better, exercising, studying, they can't anymore because they have this authority issue response in them that wants to say no to anyone or any person, whoever told us what to do. And so again, anytime a decision comes up, our brain literally goes through all of these things, and there's a lot more criteria. And if any one of them is not in line, it will prevent action. So I hope this was a good primer to help people understand why sometimes they feel stuck and aren't able to do something no matter how much they want to do it.
Into every word of this, and I feel like my brain just expanded. I'd really love to dive into, and I'm got the burning desire to need to know, how did this start in you? Where were you sitting when you had that moment of, I want to do more, I need to do this, why am I not doing it? What was that moment that the light bulb went off?
Well, like I said, growing up in this culture and society, there is just so much personal development content. And even outside of personal development content, we're seeing images and movies of people living this extravagant life, doing all these cool things. And of course, growing up, I was pushed by parents and teachers to want to do and have more as well. So it was just this constant influx that I was receiving that I should be doing better, having more, and constantly progressing. So it kind of got ingrained in me. As a result of that, I've always wanted to be more successful and have a lot more going on in life. However, every time I tried, like I couldn't make progress. I was always stuck, and I would watch one inspiring movie and I'm like, yes, it makes me want to get up off my couch and do something with my life. But then I wouldn't. Or, I had a lot of aspirations in high school. I wanted to get into an Ivy League college. Although I still got into a decent college, it was an Ivy League. In college, I had aspirations to, really get into a prestigious company after graduating. Although I had good job opportunities, I didn't get a chance to hit the mark that I had. And so I was kind of always falling short. And that question was always just kind of coming up. It's like, I know what to do. People say my work is good, but what is this barrier that I keep hitting? And like I said, in the beginning, when I was reading a lot of the personal development books, they were kind of just staying in the surface level. They were just talking about concepts such as beliefs and, like I said, motivation. But I knew there had to be more to it because I had the beliefs or I had the motivation. I definitely had the drive, but I just kept hitting against this wall. And so it was really like a good 20-year journey to come to this concept that, hey, wait a minute. There is a part of me designed to hold us back or held me back, and it's actively working to hold me back. And what's really important is that we have all heard the quote, you are your own worst enemy. Well, resistance is that enemy. It is that enemy that we have to constantly fight against to move past. And what's really important for people to also understand is anytime we go out to do something, we should prepare to know that there's parts of ourselves, our own selves will hold us back. And if we think those parts don't exist and that we're not aware of them, we can falsely assume that it's going to be much easier than it's going to be. But if we can understand there's going to be parts of us that hold us back, we can be more prepared. And just in shifting that awareness and being more prepared, it's going to increase our likelihood of success by tenfold.
What would you say one of the, I'm going to say, greatest secrets would be to overcoming this resistance? What is one of the very first steps that someone needs to realize, awaken to, or step into to start tackling the resistance?
Yeah. So there's no one secret. There's going to be a couple important things people understand, and I'll share that right now. One is to know that wanting doesn't equate to having. Just because we want something doesn't mean we'll take the necessary steps to go after it. And if a person can be aware of that, again, they could be more prepared when they are setting a goal or wanting to go after something. Two is to understand our own wants can be a hindrance to achieving success. It's crazy to think, but our own desires can pose a block to going after what we want. That's because, like I said, when the brain creates resistance, it goes through a checklist of items. Well, there's also about a good dozen reasons how our wants hinder us. And I'll give one example. One is that if we want something really badly, the more badly we want something, the stronger that resistance is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we've all experienced moments where we wanted something so bad, things weren't moving for us. But as soon as we let it go, things began to fall into place. So counterintuitively, sometimes it helps to reduce our want. I know this goes against a lot of personal development, which is talking about having a burning desire and having a desire so strong, it makes it push past everything. But that's not the reality. The reality is the stronger our want, the stronger our resistance that we have to push through. So if we can reduce the want, it can reduce the resistance and make it easier to do that thing. Now, the third and most important thing is to understand the tricks of resistance. So when our brain stops us from doing something, it doesn't tell us that it's going to stop us. It doesn't say, hey, Bryan, this thing that you're trying to do, well, it goes against our self-image, so I can't let you do it. Or, hey, that goal of yours? Well, it's gonna validate what our parents was telling us all along. And because we have authority issues, we're gonna resist it and just sit here and do nothing. The brain doesn't do that. It uses manipulative tricks, and it's important to understand the tricks your brain uses so you're not manipulated by them. And what's really interesting is that some of these tricks are so sneaky and conniving, you wouldn't think of them as tricks, which is why we fall for them so easily and why resistance wins a lot. And there's a lot of tricks the brain uses, but I'm going to share one really important one so people can get an understanding of what I mean. And one of the most simple ways the brain stops forward progress is by telling ourselves that we'll do it later or next time. And I'm going to share, a very powerful story about this so people, it really ingrains in them. Several years ago, I was in South Africa and I heard a woman speak about her journey of addiction. Now, she described a pattern that addicts fall into that she herself fell into. She said many addicts know what they're doing is wrong. When they're searching for the next hit, a part of them knows that they should stop. Though, do you know what prevents them from stopping? It's a sneaky trick that keeps them perpetually stuck in their addiction forever. They say, after the next hit, I'll stop. After the next one, I'll stop. I just need to do it one more time, but after, I'll stop. And when they say this, they're convinced after the next one, they'll stop. Absolutely convinced. In their mind, they truly believe after the next one, they will not do it. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because I know, Bryan, you and every listener here is doing this in some area of their life. A desire comes up, and in that moment, a voice surfaces that says, I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it this weekend. I'll do it next week. I'll do it next month, or I'll do it next time. And when the later and next comes, they push it off to the next and next and next until one of two things happens. One, they're married, have 2 kids, a stressful job, and as a result, no more time. Or 2, they completely forget the goal altogether. So anytime you're saying next or one more, it's a good chance it's a trick of resistance. Otherwise, you would have done it the next time. So it's really important to know that anytime you hear that voice of next and one more, it's a good chance that it's a trick. It's better that they do it now versus push it off, because as soon as they push it off, they will either forget or they'll push it off more and more until they do forget. So this is just one example of a trick. There's dozens and dozens of more. What's even more is that our brain can go to some really great lengths. I personally believe a lot of times when we fall ill or we get into some sort of an accident, it's usually because we were making progress in our life and it was the brain's last ditch effort to stop us so that it could halt the great progress we're making. And so anytime a person isn't unable to move forward, it's really important for them to start thinking of seeing the tricks that are coming up in their habits and their routines.
Would you ever say that there's a point in your life where you've had to use these thoughts and processes to the full extent? Was there ever a goal, a decision, or a want that you had that really caused some resistance and you had to walk yourself through each one of these steps to overcome that?
Oh my gosh. I've had so much resistance in life. I really think I've had a lot of goals and aspirations. And like I said, although I've had my fair share of success, I do feel like I missed the mark in a lot of ways. And a lot of the things that I wanted to do, I faced tremendous amounts of resistance. And it always was. It's like, well, why can't I push through this? And you know that list of criteria that I mentioned that the brain goes through? I literally had to go through it. It's like, okay, I worked on my beliefs. What's holding me back now? I don't have the habits for it. So I built routines that help me develop the habits. And there's other ways to build habits, like through self-talk and visualizing. I have the habit. What am I pushing up against now? I'm actually starting to make progress. And the brain is freaking out because I'm going out of what my comfort is. And what's really interesting to understand about comfort zones is our comfort zones aren't actually comfortable. They're actually painful. But we stay in them because it's a place of what's familiar. And so I had to train myself to make the direction that I wanted to go in become more familiar. And authority issues was a huge one for me. Like, I grew up always being told what to do and not to do. So at a certain point, I couldn't listen to advice. Even if the advice was useful and helpful, I couldn't do it. And in a lot of ways, I created a lot more problems for myself. and a lot more challenge, because if I just listened to the advice or did what I was told, it would have been a lot easier. So I had to work through the authority issues. And like I said, things go really deeper. There's a concept called anytime we start to do something, our mind is processing a lot of what if scenarios, all the things that can go wrong. What's really interesting, Bryan, is the brain doesn't tell you all the things it's processing. It just creates this impenetrable wall that you can't push through. And then you have to kind of figure out, like, what is it processing that it feels is too dangerous or is going to create challenges. So it's going through all of those things. And, I talked about the tricks, and then I would hit up on all these different tricks. One of the tricks is that the brain will make the project seem much bigger or more grand than it is. So this is a big one. Have you ever wanted to do something? I know this comes up for me, like whenever I want to write a book, I would have this amazing vision of how profound this book is going to be. Like everyone's going to love it. It's going to be a bestseller. I'm going to be on Oprah and all of that. As soon as you make the vision big, you make it so cumbersome, just thinking about it makes you tired and exhausted. And because you get tired and exhausted, you don't start. And it's a perfect trick of resistance by making things much bigger than it needs to be. So I started shifting my brain's grandiosity to just making it smaller. So I went through a lot of that, going through hitting up all the criterias of resistance, figuring out how resistance was showing up in my life. What's really wild about some of the tricks? So I've written over a dozen books. At a certain point, writing became a trick of resistance. And here's what I mean by that. Every time I would write a book, it was time to go market it and put myself out there. Because a part of me was kind of afraid of marketing it and putting myself out there, it would create another idea for another book. And it would convince me this is going to be a great book. Like this is the one that you're going to feel confident on. So let's go write this one first. And I spent a year writing it. And that year I was writing, I wasn't marketing. So it was a perfect trick of resistance, keeping me from taking the next step.
Oh.
Yeah. So I've been through a lot of it, which is why I was able to come up with this concept.
So this has brought up a handful of burning questions in my mind.
Yeah.
And I want to start with, what would your thoughts be, or what would you tell someone who came at you with the perspective of more of a spiritual concept, to the saying that the universe puts this all in its own time? We don't get the power to decide when things happen. It's the universe's time.
This is a good question. And I think there is some validity to it, because there has been moments in my life where I wanted something and I really pushed for it. And then at a certain point, resistance won and I just kind of let go. And then I did eventually get to it and was able to accomplish what I wanted. And when I did, it felt like that was a time I should have done it. Like that was a time for it. And so I can't deny that. I can't deny that there is a universal time, but I want people to understand that thinking can be a trick of resistance. Does that make sense? Because if we're just like, well, if the universe wanted it, then it would bring it then. And I know a lot of people who have spent their whole life waiting for things because of a thinking like that. And it is a challenge, because sometimes we do need to take things slower, but sometimes those things can be a trick. And it's kind of having the acuity to know what's a trick and what's not. And sometimes the only way to know it is just to do it and push through it. And if you achieve it, great. And if not, then it wasn't the right time. I hope that helps.
The other one that I'm sitting here with is going, you've got someone like me who is incredibly ADHD. My brain has a very hard time focusing on one task at a time, or sometimes just getting started can be overwhelming. Or I get into this hyper fixated mode and I'm good for a good chunk of time and then it's gone. How does someone who struggles with all of those factors and is wired a little bit differently use these tools to overcome resistance?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the concept of resistance, we have to look at our wants. We look at the resistance itself, the criteria the brain uses to decide if we should do something or not, as well as look at the tricks. How is the resistance manifesting? So we may not know exactly what the criterias are, but we can see that we're in resistance by looking at the tricks. Are we putting things off regularly? Are we making excuses? Are we making things bigger, so big that we get exhausted that we don't even try? But the wanting part's really important too, because as I mentioned, our own wants can be a challenge in getting them. And as I also mentioned, there's many challenges that our wants create. And one of them is what I call an overactive want. This is where the brain creates all sorts of desires all of the time.
Well, yeah, I get that.
You get that, yeah. So it sees something and it wants it. It hears about something and it wants that too. In fact, it doesn't have to hear or see anything. It pulls us in all sorts of directions. Before we can start on one thing, it's creating other wants for us to chase. And in these situations, it really helps to ground or contain the wanting mechanism. Otherwise, it will go in all directions and it'll be difficult to focus on any one. And what I suggest is to pick one want and cut out all the rest. Don't think about, don't worry about, and don't consider any other wants your brain is producing until the first is finished. Now, this isn't always easy because we don't necessarily pick or choose our wants. It gets triggered and stimulated. And for somebody with an overactive wanting mechanism, it's being triggered and stimulated all of the time. So it helps to take it one step further and try to cut out as many triggers and stimuli as possible. Unfortunately, that means cutting out television, media, and oftentimes even people, because seeing people doing and having things can trigger jealousy and make us want to do and have those things too. And this one hits really home for me because most of my life, I did have an overactive wanting mechanism. It's the reason I've written over a dozen books, traveled to over 100 countries, and have done all sorts of things like skydiving, scuba diving, snowboarding, dancing, rock climbing, and so much more. My brain was stimulated by all the different things to do. If I saw a new car, I wanted it. The latest gadget came out, I wanted that too. Most anything I saw on television, I wanted as well. And these wants were overpowering me. They would make me lose interest on what I was already working on, or they made me forget about what I was already working on. And what's more is that these wants were very unpleasant. They would put my head in a knot and it would tighten my muscles. And I realized that if I wanted to accomplish anything in life, I had to get a handle on this overactive want. And I did exactly as I suggested. I cut out television, social media, YouTube, internet, and even went as far as to stop reading personal development and cut out people and essentially created a bubble for myself that contained as much distracting stimuli as possible. Now, I know this sounds extreme, but I personally believe that a person with an overactive wanting mechanism, which is very much exhibited in qualities like ADHD, this may not only be the best solution, but the only solution because our wants are very unruly, Bryan. Once they get triggered, it's difficult to release them. And once they get triggered, it's difficult to focus on other things. So sometimes it just helps to remove as many triggers as possible. And at the same time, tell yourself to commit to like one or two things at a time. In fact, a lot of what I have achieved wasn't because I was working on multiple things at a time. That's really one of the easiest ways to failure. I did it by just focusing on one or two things at a time. And once I finished this, then I would start on something else. It wasn't like I wrote 12 books at the same time. And what's really interesting, Bryan, is that this aspect of the wanting mechanism can also be a trick of resistance. What I mean by that is, let's say you're working on a goal and you're making progress. Then you hit up against resistance where you're like, oh, I'm starting to get a little fear because I'm making progress. And if I finish this, people will give me feedback. And am I ready for feedback? Or whatever the reason is, we start hitting up against resistance. Resistance wants to halt our progress. So what does it do? It creates other wants for you to chase. And as soon as you start going into these other wants, you stop making progress on that. What's even more is that this aspect of the wanting mechanism will keep us from making progress on all of the things we're working on. Because as soon as we start making progress here, it'll trigger a want to start something here. As soon as we start making progress here, it'll trigger the want to go somewhere else. And as long as we're shifting, our progress is slow in all directions. And as a result, we don't really move in any one. And it's a perfect way that resistance keeps us from moving forward in life. I hope that made sense.
Massively. We've spent a lot of time talking about wants. I'd really love for you to define, so it's very clear to our audience, what a want is compared to a need. Because there actually is a large difference between a want and a need. Things that we need in our life and things that we want. How do we differentiate them, especially when there's resistance telling us that we might get those things mixed up? The things that we need aren't really needs, they're wants. And the things that we want might be needs, but how do we make sure that those are two very clear, separate things?
I would say, and I don't want to go against any thinking or idea, is I would say most any desire, whether it's for a need or a want, is a want. So anything that is a pull towards something, whether it is a pull towards food and water because we need it, or whether that's a pull towards television, something we don't necessarily need. So I would kind of define it as all wants. And yeah, some people would say, well, I need television. So needs are very personal to a person. It's like, like I like walking barefoot. And so do I need expensive shoes like the other guy? Probably not. Somebody who likes to wear fashionable shoes says shoes are a need. So it's more what it is for that person. But at the same time, effect is the same. We can have overactive needs. We can have need for food. We can have a need for this, a need for that, a need for that. And the effect is the same because it pulls us in different directions. And it can be a trick of resistance. So what's going to be helpful is to really narrow down the absolute needs that they have, the things that's gonna be non-negotiable and things that are gonna help them move forward in life, and the things that can be enjoyable but not in an excessive way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, I really like the way that you broke that down, and I've never thought about it that way. An area that I'd love to start diving into here is that if you could turn the clock backwards and talk to a younger you, what's one of the greatest pieces of advice that you would tell a younger you that might change the trajectory of your life, that if you had known what you know now?
Yeah, this is an awesome question. I haven't been asked this, but what I will preface the answer with is, as we get older, we do look back at our life and think, I wish I'd done this. I wish I hadn't done that. And we do feel a little bit of regret. And what you'll notice is that older people are, in one way or another, are always trying to coach or mentor others. And I think it comes down to this need of like, what would I have done differently if I was talking to my younger self? So I want people to start noticing that more because it is really this desire they have. And there are a few things that always come to mind that I wish I hadn't done. I would tell my younger me a couple things that are really, really important. Unfortunately, I grew up on television. And so a lot of what I had learned when I was younger was from television. And I thought it was a lot about the external. On television, there's just so much flashing of nice cars and wealth and this. And I was chasing those things. And ultimately, they weren't as fulfilling as it made it seem. And what's more is people don't realize the damaging effects of television. There's many reasons why. There's a lot of violence. It creates a false expectation of reality. But more importantly, the scenes change so much and there's so much animation and tickers and banners. There's so much going on. It actually trains the brain to hold attention for shorter and shorter periods of time. And yeah, so media and television not only changed my expectations of reality, but it made it so it was difficult to focus, which is why I wrote that book on concentration, because I really had to retrain my brain to be able to hold attention for a longer time, to be able to do the things I needed. So that would be one of the most important things, be like, hey, avoid television and media, because as I mentioned, all those reasons, plus it took away a lot of time that I could be doing something else. The second thing is I was trying to fit in a lot when I was younger. So when I was growing up, I saw people doing different things, and I had a lot of like undeserving, or I felt lower or inferior to people. So I looked at others as a model of what to do, what was healthy behavior, and what was fulfilling. And unfortunately, Brian, most people's behaviors are not very healthy. And I would even go as far as to say destructive, at least the people I was trying to model and trying to fit in with and things like that. And I did that for a long time, like probably until after college, realizing that, wow, like a lot of people that I thought I was looking up to had it figured out or had it together, but they don't. And there's just not a lot of good information about the principles of the mind and body, how it operates, the best way it operates, and what to avoid and whatever. And so I would say for those people who are looking to others to try to figure out like what's going on, no, most of them are just as lost as you. And I wouldn't, I guess, follow someone or, yeah, I'd be very careful of who to model or who to look up to, if that makes sense.
Absolutely does. I am a huge believer that it is crucially important to look at who you're taking your advice from and who you're
Yes.
modeling your behavior and your actions after.
Yes.
Now, you've spent an enormous amount of time learning from shamans, healers, incredible speakers, leaders. I would love to know, what is one of the greatest, most standout pieces of advice that you've had the opportunity to take in from all of these incredible minds?
Wow, I think that's a good question. I mean, I've learned a lot from a lot of people, and a lot of that information has been stepping stones. So at one point, the information was very crucial, but then when I got to another level, I learned something from another person that was very crucial as well. And I think if there's one advice, I don't know if I picked it up from just any one person, but I think it came from different people. And it's a concept of consistency. Before I understood consistency and the importance of consistency, I wasn't really making a lot of progress. And once I understood it, my success kind of went through the roof. So a lot of coaches and experts and people in the space talk about consistency, but they don't really kind of really tell you why it's so important. And what I want to say is the way the human mind and body are built, we're either growing or we're regressing. There's no in between. So let's say we spend 3 months dieting and exercising. In the past, I used to think I would stay there forever, but that's not the case. As soon as you stop, you start falling back. And then when you start up again, you get up to that point, and the brain will even convince you, and it's a trick of resistance, that, hey, you've been working hard, you've been making progress, you deserve to take a break. And as soon as we take that break, we start falling back.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't and we continue, we start moving forward. So we're either constantly growing or constantly falling back. As soon as we stop doing something, we're just going to start falling back. And as soon as we continue, we're going to actually start growing, which is why I say we're either growing or regressing. There's no in between. And once I learned that, that was pivotal because, a lot of times I would study and I would learn different information. And I thought, okay, I got it. Because I got it, my mind, I was convinced that that information would stay there forever. And as soon as I moved away from it, I started losing that information. It works mentally too. We start losing skills, we start losing our knowledge, and we start losing how we develop ourselves physically as soon as we stop. But once, like I said, I understood the concept that if I don't want to lose it, I got to stick with it. And as I would stick with things, I would make huge progress. So consistency is the most important thing. And it's a reason you see people fall into patterns of yo-yo dieting, is because they do put in that effort. The 3 months, 6 months, or even a year, they get to that point and they think, all right, I'm there. And then they let go, stop doing what they were doing that got them there, so that they start regressing. In fact, one of the people that I learned from said, make your main thing your main thing. Keep your main thing your main thing. So the things that you were doing that got you that success, you got to keep doing it once you get that success. And what another mentor said in line with that is, success is much harder to keep than to achieve. this is important. It's in line with consistency. Once you get to the success, you think, wow, that was a hard work. But the hard work starts once you've got there and to maintain what you were doing till you got there. So with everything I said, it all really boils down to just showing up on a regular basis and continue to keep showing up.
Huge.
Huge. This is huge. I don't think
I love how you explained it because you just made it so simple and in a way that made it so understandable, in that whether you're doing it or you're not doing it, you're going to go forward or start to lean backwards. And as you described it, the dieting and what you just said made such crystal clear sense on the concept. Probably one of the better ways that I've ever heard someone describe consistency.
Yeah, it's huge. And I want to say, I don't think the listeners truly understand why consistency is so important, but it is huge. It's not about how hard you work, but how consistent you are in your effort. Like you can show up with your A game intermittently, but you'll make far more progress if you show up with, a normal effort on a regular basis.
So we talk about going forward, and obviously you're somebody who is probably always got something on the go. What is next for you? Do you have another book coming? Do you have anything else on the go? What are you doing that is going forward?
So another great question. As I mentioned, I've written a dozen books, and I had an existential crisis when ChatGPT came out, because what took me nearly 15 years to develop as a skill of writing, I saw ChatGPT doing in a matter of seconds. Now, my writing's still better than ChatGPT, but I, quote unquote, saw the writing on the wall that it was time to pivot, because I think AI is going to get good at writing eventually, and it'll catch up. And luckily, prior to ChatGPT coming out, I developed the concept of internal resistance in my course, which is talked about for quite a bit. But now I'm moving to the next thing, which is I have developed a technique that helps people quickly overcome trauma, PTSD, bad breakup, loneliness. It works on the emotional level. So my books are a lot more mental performance, memory, concentration, reading. And this concept of internal resistance kind of works more on the physical level of like doing, but there's one piece missing, which is emotional level. And there's not a lot of information or even understanding of it. A majority of what's out there is trying to manage emotions, but I think it's possible to release a lot of our suppressed emotions, which is where our traumas and PTSD reside. So now I have moved on to that as like a one-on-one thing that I do to help people really dive in to their unconscious and work through the resistance as well as other challenges they have, but doing it on the emotional level.
Very cool. This seems like a great place to bring our conversation full circle. And at the end of every one of my podcasts, I like to pose a really deep, powerful question. So Kam, the question I throw out to everybody is, what is your definition of truly living your best life?
I had a question that was asked similar, like, what do you think is success? And I think the answer to that question really answers this question, is doing what it is that you want. And as I mentioned, it's not easy because we have resistance that get in the way. And what makes it even challenging is our tricks of resistance. So a lot of times we think we're doing what we want to do, but that really could be a trick to something else that we truly want. And so our mind has kind of shifted our focus away from something we truly desire, but is too afraid of. Or we have multiple desires that we need to pick one on. And so it really comes down to like what it is that you truly want and you being able to do it. And I think that really kind of hits the answer to that question.
Love it. When we take what we want and we overcome the resistance, we can achieve anything we want to do.
Right. But at the same time, not being distracted by our tricks that can convince us what I'm trying to say is our tricks can convince us that the thing that we're doing is our true want when it's actually something else.
With the complexity of life sometimes. How our mind works.
It's so complex. Yeah. That's why I really talk a lot about the tricks, because our tricks, as I said earlier, it's very deceptive. It's really sneaky. And how it shows up, you really have to be like aware.
Yeah. Kam, this has been a truly insightful, and I feel like my brain has grown, and now I can focus on the things that maybe I need to pivot to one thing, my one want, and really focus on that and get rid of the distractions. So I've learned a lot. I am well aware that there's going to be so many people out there that when they listen to this episode, they are going to be nodding along like I was the whole time onto every word going, I get that. I've been there. Oh my gosh. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. It's been incredible.
Thank you very much, Bryan. Can I offer a free gift to your audience?
Absolutely.
Sure. They can either go to kamknight.com, KAMKNIGHT.com, or text the word 26786, or text the word flow to 26786. And I have a guide on 5 ways to end procrastination and sabotage. It seems like a simple concept, but it's actually goes deep into the psychology of what holds us back and the tricks that they should be aware of to keep them from being held back by their own mind. And again, they can get that by texting FLOW, FLOW, to 26786, or just going to my website, kamknight.com.
I will definitely be getting on board with that and sending you a text for sure. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Bryan. This was awesome.
That's a wrap on today's episode. A heartfelt thank you to our guests for showing up with honesty, depth, and wisdom. And thank you for listening in. I hope something in this conversation stirred something in you, a memory, a reminder, or maybe even a return to a part of yourself that's been waiting. If you enjoyed this episode, can I ask a quick 30-second favor? Share it with someone you know, someone who might need to hear this message too. And don't forget to explore past episodes. There's so much more waiting for you there. Until next time, I'm your host, Bryan White, and this is The Return Project.